Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about the issue of Stephen Joyce's $92 million tweet. It's gone down in history as probably the most expensive tweet that's ever been made. It's pioneered a whole new way of delivering the budget for the government, and I'm sure the Finance Minister would agree it's a much more efficient way of announcing government finance policy than we've seen from this government at all in the last 8 years. It was an extraordinary backflip by the government. After 8 years of treating Housing New Zealand as some kind of cash cow, they've made a net withdrawal from our public housing organisation of more than $560 million. That's when you net out the capital contributions against the dividends. More than $500 million in net taken out of our state housing organisation in the middle of a housing crisis. And day after day, Bill English has stood up in this House and said, well, the dividend's very important because it's how we impose kind of financial discipline on Housing New Zealand. But that discipline, sir, went out the window. In a fit of pique on a Sunday afternoon, Stephen Joyce decided to tweet that the government would no longer be extracting dividends from Housing New Zealand. That was a $92 million announcement made by Stephen Joyce in a tweet. And that, sir, speaks volumes about this government's housing policy. They're completely at sea. They are making it up as they go along. You can see the panic in their eyes. Paula Bennett announces a policy on the eve of the budget to offer people $5,000 to leave town, and Bill English doesn't even know about it, nor does the Prime Minister. It's the day before the budget, and this is what's going on with the government's housing policy. A few days later, Paula Bennett announces that government officials have gone out with the Salvation Army to knock on the car doors of homeless people at Pullman Park in South Auckland. The so-called flying squads that never existed. They've gone down in history with the unicorns and all manner of other mythical creatures, the government's homelessness flying squads. But this is what's happening with the housing crisis and this government's panicked response to it. They are desperate, they are making it up as they go along, and it's a comedy of errors. It would be funny, Mr. Chairman, if the consequences of this government's negligence were not so tragic in the effect that they're having on the people of this country. And I want to say something about, I thought, one of the most shocking stories that the media covered over the last 4 weeks was the way that the government has been paying thousands of dollars a week to one of the worst slum landlords in South Auckland, and referring desperate families to this slum landlord, where the government is shelling out in bond and advance rent and weekly rent to this woman called Debbie Iskander, who had at least about 10 properties in the South Auckland suburb of Manurewa. She was putting people into unconsented garages, entire families living in unconsented garages. Entire families crammed into single rooms in shared houses. And for that privilege, people were paying up to $500 a week in rent. And the government condoning this, actually referring these desperate people to go and live in unconsented garages and single rooms with no toilet facilities, no bathroom facilities, no kitchen facilities. So this illustrates how bad the housing crisis has got, and how absolutely morally and politically bankrupt this government's response to the housing crisis is, that they are referring people to the worst slum landlords. It is a total abdication of the government's responsibility to treat people with decency and to put a decent roof over people's heads. It shows, sir, the piecemeal tinkering that epitomises this government's housing policy. Paula Bennett announced a few weeks ago $41 million over 4 years for emergency housing. Actually, you know, we didn't criticise her for that. Good on her for making some contribution. But she was forced to come to this House within a few days and acknowledge that that financial commitment wouldn't provide a single new bed. It would only fund the existing houses.
Dennis O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.